This is The Civil Fleet, the podcast focused on the activist led refugee rescue and support missions across Fortress Europe, with me, Ben Coles. In today's episode, we're going to speak with Klaas van Dijken, one of the co founders of Lighthouse Reports, which is an investigative website based in the Netherlands and has done absolutely amazing stories about Europe's borders and much, much more. Klaas is going to tell us about a story that he and his team exposed earlier this month about how asylum seekers are being detained in secret prisons aboard commercial ships and being pushed back from Italy to Greece. It's absolutely insane. He's also going to tell us about another story that his team worked on, and I think it was published in December, about the black sites where asylum seekers are being detained and sometimes tortured by border guards and then pushed back across EU's borders with Turkey before they can claim asylum. Also, absolutely insane. If you haven't checked out Lighthouse Reports before, you absolutely should do so. Anyway, before we get into today's story, let me remind you that if you like what the Civil Fleet does and you would like to help us continue doing what we do, then you can donate a small amount of money, the price of a coffee or a beer or whatever, to us to help us cover the cost of doing this. You can go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet. That's ko-fi.com/civilfleet. And you can make a small donation or an absolutely enormous one if you feel like. Also, do be sure to check out the Civil Fleet's website, civilfleet.com. We've got investigative stories on there too. We've got reports about what's happening in the Mediterranean most of the time and some other stuff too. So go to civilfleet.com to find out more. Anyway, that's enough of my rambling. Let's get on with the show. Klaas van Dijk, shall we get started?
Yes, please.
Okay, Klaas van Dijk, thank you so much for coming on the Civil Fleet podcast. I was just checking, I paused then to make sure I got your name right.
Yeah.
So Klaas, could you, we've got you on the podcast today to talk about a story that you've co-written with Lighthouse Reports on secret prisons being on commercial ships that are sending people back and forth from Italy and Greece, or from Italy to Greece. Before we get talking about that today, Klaas, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit about what Lighthouse Reports is?
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm a journalist based in the Netherlands, and I started my career up, I think, in journalism 2005. I've For the first years, I mainly worked in Eastern and Central Africa as a reporter. I did work in Afghanistan. So yeah, mainly conflict reporting. And then a couple of years ago, I co-founded the organization, non-profit organization Lighthouse Reports. And Lighthouse Reports, what it does is that we set up and lead investigations, cross-border investigations, mainly in Europe. And all the investigations are linked to the themes of corruption, climate, conflict, and migration. And within that, within Lighthouse Reports, or within these themes, we set up what we call newsrooms, where journalists, members of Lighthouse Reports, work together on more specific investigations. And for the last 3 years, I've been focusing or working and leading the work into what we call the Borders Newsroom, that focuses on human rights violations at Europe's borders. And the way we work with Lighthouse Reports, it's slightly different than from other media organizations. So we are not a platform. So Lighthouse Reports does not publish themselves. So we lead the investigations, and we invite from Europe's leading media like Der Spiegel, ARD in Germany, and Le Monde, but also the BBC and the Guardian, or Al Jazeera, to smaller or more local media in European countries to come and work with us together on investigations. And the reason for doing that is that we believe that only the complex investigations can only be done by a team and by collaborating. Because these kind of these kind of investigations are time consuming, expensive, something that most media cannot afford to do anymore. But we think that these investigations are important to do anyway. Besides that, we have what we call specialists in-house that we can blend into the investigation. And when I say specialists, I mean that's the open source investigators. So people research that they're really good in verifying visual material or finding things on the social media. We have data journalists and a data scientist, so a data team, and we have money trails experts. This has a great advantage because when media have these specialists themselves or in-house, it's often they only have a team of open source investigators, or they only have a money trails expert. But we can mix these kind of specialties together and mix them into the investigations, and then the really interesting stuff start to happen, especially then when we can bring that together with reporting or reporters on the ground and experienced investigative journalists from other media houses or from Lighthouse Reports themselves. So yeah, Lighthouse Reports it started as a non-profit in 2019 we started with 3 people, but at the moment we are with 25, and that's just the core team. And besides that, we work with a range of freelancers and specialists, and then all the journalists, staff journalists from the European media.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thanks for that. It's quite a detailed background information.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah,
no, it's brilliant. It's really good. It's I know I've been aware of your work, of the work that Lighthouse does since I've been covering this kind of stuff, and I've seen your stories a lot. So for me, it's really good to get, like I said before we started recording, it's really good to get you on, or get you on to talk about Lighthouse Reports. I'll have a link in it in the show notes so anyone listening can look on their phone and be able to find it if they don't follow you already. So the reason I wanted to get you on, because I saw a story you published, I think it was this week or last week. I'm confused by the days. I think it was last week now. And it was about secret prisons on private ships used to send people from Italy back to Greece, which is absolutely shocking. And you had video footage from there and photographs from these secret prisons. So I wondered if you could start off by, telling us how did this story come about, and kind of give us a bit of background information and of the story, how this happened.
Yeah, of course. So the story idea really started, that was during a meeting. We had a team meeting with Lighthouse collaborators I think it's 1.5 years ago, and it was a meeting in Berlin, and one of the people that then just started to work with us, Jack Sappel, who is now one of our visual investigators and open source investigators. He has an activist background and worked for an organization called No Name Kitchen, that does a lot of work with people on the move at Europe's borders. And he heard about this practice and wanted to, and it's quite an old practice. So what happened is people, refugees that are in Greece and they want to move to Italy, one of the ways to do so is that they go as stowaways on one of the ferries that moves between Greece and Italy, and they, for example, hide themselves under a truck. And then when they reach Italy, the ports, they get off the ship and try to stay in the country and either claim asylum or move on. But then quite often these people are captured by either the port authorities or by Italian forces or by the security personnel on the ferries, and handed over to the Italian police, where then the Italian police they keep the people, and without any process, so without taking fingerprints or doing an official interview or assess the situation and the circumstance and whether or why people want to leave Greece and whether they want to claim asylum, they put them back on the ferry. So they hand them over to the captain, and then the people are detained in places that we discovered are really inhumane. And so these places are, for example, what is it, like a metal room cage on the same floor or next to where the lorries are parked. And it's in the summer, it's ridiculously hot inside there. It's a really small room. People scribble some words on the walls. They get a single sheet to sleep on. We saw one of the times a single bottle of water. But also, for example, there were shoe prints on the side of the wall, so that indicates that people are trying to climb out. But there is this kind of cage structure on top of it, so that people cannot escape. So that's one of the places. The other location is a room next to the dining room on the ferries. So these commercial ferries, people are going on holiday. There's a casino. You can sip from a cocktail, etc. But next to it, there is a room with a broken toilet and broken sink. The ceiling is coming off. But that's another place where they keep people for during the entire journey. Also there, people scribble the name and the dates on the wall that they've been kept there. There's 2 mattresses on the floor, and that's about it. And the third place is also next to where the lorries are parked, where sometimes tourists can store their luggage. So these kind of metal shelves, and they chain people to it. So with handcuffs, they attach people to the metal shelves. And then they are shipping people back, including minors, unaccompanied minors. We discovered, and a journey can take more than a day. And that's and people are not allowed to or often cannot sleep. They don't get food or drinks, and then they're shipped back to Greece, and they're handed over to the Greek authorities, and then basically released, and they can go their own way in or try it again. This practice is quite old, we discovered. So it's been happening for years, and Italy was condemned by it by the European Court of Human Rights in 2014, and they were ordered to stop this practice. But then Italy had said they would do so, and there was a monitoring mechanism, so they have to report to the court what kind of things they measured, measures they had put in place, but Italy never stopped, and there were all the time testimonies from victims and recorded by various activist groups or non-governmental organizations but the thing is, there was no visual evidence of these places and these practices. And one of the things that we are doing with the Borders newsroom at Lighthouse Reports is to get the visual evidence of wrongdoings. And so, yeah, that was really the goal of this investigation, to visually prove that these places exist and that people are being kept on the ferries.
Yeah, and the footage that you got and the photographs that I've seen that you've published were pretty shocking. I think there was a picture of someone that they're cuffed to like a railing in a room. It's awful, and people have it mentioned in the story that people have, and you just said people have scribbled their names, in the dust or written it on the walls, this kind of thing. I don't know if you can say, but how did you get into those rooms? Did you just get on the ships and try? I guess you must have had some kind of information of where those rooms were.
Yeah, so that's the reason why it took so long to do this investigation is that we really had to figure out where the rooms were and which ships people were on. So we had testimonies to go on, but then often people on the move don't know the names of these the ferry companies or the ferries that they were on. So the reporters from the team, they had to do a couple of trips on different ferries and start from scratch by building up contacts with workers on the ferries, speaking to truck drivers, to police in the port, and it turned out that everybody on these ferries who are working on these ferries and people in the port, everybody knows about it. It was some kind of open secret. Everybody knew, and then the workers on the ferries, they were telling our reporters where these places were, and then they start to investigate on the ferry themselves and capture the rooms. And besides, of course, finding victims of this practice, and so, like you mentioned, the man which that was able to take a selfie with his phone, that he was attached or handcuffed on to a metal shelf. We found him. We got that picture, and then in a second trip, on that ferry we located the exact location where he was chained on the ferry.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I suppose you could argue that people shouldn't stow away on ships, right? But they obviously don't deserve to then be, especially if they're seeking asylum, to be pushed back to Greece. As far as I understand it, once you arrive in a country, if the authorities get you, you can claim asylum, right? But they're obviously denying this and just pushing them back to Greece, which I'm sure Greece is not happy about. Which company? I think you mentioned in the group, is it Attica Group? Do you know if this is happening on other ships? Is it just this? I know in the story it's just this one, but is there, maybe you can't say, but is it happening on other ships? Is it just this one?
We suspect it's happening on other ships as well, but we were not able to prove it, so therefore we couldn't report on it. But yeah, these we found the three locations of three different ferries, and they all happen to be owned by Attica Group, which is a Greek company.
And then, like, the conditions in there, I think in the report it mentions that some people on one of the ships, there's three ships, right, that are mentioned in the story, I think, and on one of the ships, people were next to a broken toilet and this kind of thing. Like, what were the conditions like on these ships when you guys went in there? Was it still the same?
Yeah, it is very much still the same. Well, I'm not sure if they're still doing it after our report came out. But yeah, people, it's the tourists are really on board. They're buying their food, they go to a casino, they have a good time, and at the same time, in the room just meters away or below decks, there are people detained They often testimony say that, or the victims say that they are being beaten by either the crew or by the Italian authorities, and yeah, they are not allowed to get out of the room. They don't know what's day and night, because the rooms or the places, they don't have windows. Yeah, and they don't, yeah, without deprived from food and water. So yeah, it's a very, very tough journey. But there are some testimonies that people are saying that a crew member brings them food once or twice, but they are officially not allowed to do so.
And like, it's just so dystopian. There's people up there on their holiday drinking champagne or whatever, and then there's people underground, poor people trapped. It's just awful. And roughly how many people do you think this has happened to? I think you mentioned a figure that I think you can report on, but you suspect is higher, right?
Yeah, so the data is a little bit fake, because Greece is saying a higher number than Italy, but it's about hundreds of people each year. But because it's all kind of unofficial, the real number is probably much higher. That this is happening to people. We were able to track down and verify 14 cases that happened during the last year. And that was, yeah, mainly focused on a couple of ports in Italy.
Where are they being dropped off in Greece?
In Greece, it's in two places, Eugoumenica and Patras.
But do you know, are there
Mhm.
cases of people being pushed back multiple times?
Yeah, there are people that are trying this. So what's good to understand about the people that are trying this is, the refugees, this is basically their last option to try and leave Greece, because other routes over land are quite often either too dangerous or mainly too expensive. So with the ferries, it's considered to be very difficult to reach Italy, because they're very strict in the port, and the security is quite tight. And of course, risking being, well, put yourself under a truck and then try to get yourself on a ferry is also very risky. But these are the people without money left. So these are the poorest refugees trying to do this. And then when they get back to one of the places, they are staying quite often in abandoned factories, where they live with, well, next to nothing. And yeah, they're trying to survive and then trying to go to Italy again.
Yeah, and in Greece, like, people have been detained in detention camps, right? Or been placed in places where they can't leave and stuff. It just sounds really terrible there too. So
Yeah, no, it is, and also quite a lot of European countries are not allowed to send people back to Greece. So there is an official, Italy could handle this in an official way. And that's of course the Dublin Agreement. So or the Dublin process. So when people arrive and they assess the situation, they do an official interview, and then they discuss, okay, people came through Greece, and they already claimed asylum, etc., etc. And then Italy is allowed to send people back to Greece, but that takes, well, at least a month or probably longer to do this. But for example, when people come in the Netherlands, and the Netherlands wants to send people back to Greece, they're not allowed to at the moment, because it's because of the conditions in Greece.
the Dublin Agreement, I'll have some links for that for people who don't know, but it's like, it's supposed to, like, when people come in through the southern European countries, they're supposed to be registered, right? And they kind of have to stay there. So that it's
Yeah,
kind of so
correct.
they don't end up in Northern Europe, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So I think we should move on to the other story. I mean, I could talk about that story all day, but there was a second story that you guys have worked on as well. about Europe's black sites. I think was the title was something along that. I'll also
Right.
link to that
Yeah.
as well.
Mhm.
But could you tell us, about this? Is also something I think a lot of people have suspected, and you guys unearthed evidence of this happening. So what is it? What are these black
Yeah.
sites?
So it started with testimonies from people on the move, and unfortunately, it matters who tells the story. So it's quite often people, politicians, policymakers, normal European citizens, they don't believe the testimonies from refugees. They say they make things up, they make things worse than it is, to get a better chance of getting asylum, and etc. But during the work that we were doing at the borders, we did hear testimonies from people that were kept in a shipping container, or that were kept in an abandoned house, or in some kind of cage or shed, and they were there held by European, according to them, by European border forces, and kept there for longer or shorter periods of time, and then they were sent back, or deported over the border, pushed back over the border illegally, by these countries, without being able to claim asylum. And these testimonies came from countries like Bulgaria, Hungary, Croatia, and what I've, with the experience on reporting on these issues, when you hear this for the first time, you think, okay, this is too crazy to be true, that these places, they cannot, I mean, it's not possible that these places exist, or that this is happening. And then also the stuff that people are telling what's happening in those places, like this cannot happen within the EU. But then I also learned that when this comes up like a few times in testimonies, or where people telling this, then it's probably true, because it's too crazy not to be true. So we started to investigate that, and we started with that a year ago, and to collect testimonies from people, to narrow down places where this could happen, and then we discovered that there is some kind of shed or a cage inside the shed, on a parking lot of a Bulgarian border police station, where they are keeping asylum seekers, refugees, for a day or longer, sometimes days, before they push them back over the border with Turkey. So there are quite a number of people, from Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, people fleeing war and then fleeing Turkey, because the situation in Turkey is also not that great. They try to move on to the European Union. They cross into Bulgaria, and when they are kept more inside Bulgaria, not directly at the border, they are collected by police, and then they are put in this cage. And we discovered the location of the cage, by basically using Google Street View. So we knew the place, so the place in Bulgaria, the small little town where it's happening, and then with the community, refugee community in Turkey, we went through the streets on a phone, and they recognize the place, so you can just go to Google Street View and see it for yourself. But then, of course, we wanted to capture it, and we want to get the visual evidence that people are being kept inside, but also that it's linked to Bulgarian police forces. So we went there a couple of times, and in the end, we succeeded in putting a small camera with a metal hook, inside there, and with a remote control, we started recording when people were in, and they're between 12 and 20 people are kept in some kind of cage. And we captured on video how Bulgarian forces are then taking those people out, and then what happened next is that they transport them in an army truck to the border and deport them. And besides that, we then also discovered that Frontex, the European Border Agency, that they are present at the same location, and that they are parking their cars on a daily basis in front of the chat. There's no way that they don't know that this practice is going on. So that was one place, and the other one was a metal shipping container, the border between Hungary and Serbia. And again, a lot of people were talking about the practice in these containers, but we were able to narrow down the exact location of this container, and filmed how people are being transported to there, and then find people who were kept in these containers, and they are saying that they're being pepper sprayed, that they are beaten, that are not allowed to sleep, that the Hungarians are using dogs to control them. It's horrific stuff. And in Croatia, we found out that the Croatians are having some kind of new practice after we showed, or we visually prove and captured Croatian border forces beating up people at the border. That was 1.5 years ago. The Croatians are being more careful at the moment, and not beating people up that much, but they are now keeping people inside, in the back of a police van, and then let people cook in the hot sun. And this is also known as some kind of hotboxing. So this is also stuff that the regime in Eritrea does to the people by putting people in a shipping container in the desert. It's a form of torture. And so then people, it's really getting hot inside there, and then they're driving around like crazy, and then they push them back. This is a form of violence that doesn't leave marks on people. So it's hard to it's hard to then show for refugees to show others what they've done. So yeah, that's Europe's black sites. So places where refugees, innocent people, are being kept, tortured, and then illegally sent back out of the EU.
Yeah, it's awful, and like this is the kind of things you hear about quite a lot, actually. And it's great that you managed to. I mean, it's terrible that this thing even exists, but it's great that you managed to expose it. But yeah, Frontex as well. Frontex is already in a lot of hot water at the moment. Have you sort of, with these two stories that you've got, or any of your other stories, have you seen any? You know, what's the reaction, the aftermath of these reports, and has any of it stuck on Frontex or this kind of thing? Or like, you know, is there any moves from the EU that can stop this stuff?
There is some, yes. So the Council of Europe officially asked Bulgaria to investigate, and they are following what is happening in Bulgaria, and to these places, and the violence at the border, and also on a different level in Bulgaria. The reporting from journalists or from media there wasn't really much focused on the asylum issues or migration, but after we released this, and it became really big news in Bulgaria, and all media were focused on this. They traveled to the cage themselves to film the location, etc. And it did put a lot of pressure on the government. Frontex promised to investigate, and Frontex has a new director, and he made a statement last week that he said pushbacks are illegal wherever they are happening, and he wants to make sure, the new director wants to make sure that Frontex is not involved or not complicit into these pushbacks. Well, because we proved as Lighthouse, we proved previously that Frontex was involved, knew about this, and that they tried to cover it up. So they wanna stop with this practice, which is hopefully that happens. Yeah, and on in Hungary, there are investigations going on by the public prosecutor on this matter, and in Croatia, there's less of a reaction. Basically, the opposite. Croatian got into the Schengen area, Schengen zone, after years. They're now officially part of the Schengen, which is some kind of, you can see it's some kind of approval by the European Commission or by the EU that what Croatia is doing at the borders with Bosnia, that they approve these violent practices.
So with the people, what kind of people have you seen that were involved in these black sites? Has there been children that were either mentioned in that you saw in this investigation, or that have been mentioned in other testimonies and stuff? Do you know if this is happening to only adults, or is it also happening to unaccompanied minors?
Yeah, it's also happening to children, unaccompanied minors, or whole families. So we weren't able to visually prove that people are kept in cages or the cage or the shed in Bulgaria. But we did find videos of families, or a sister and or two sisters in the back of a police van in Croatia. There are testimonies from young boys being kept in a container in Hungarian on the Hungarian-Serbian border. So yeah, it's happening to everybody that is on the move.
Yeah, it's really awful. Like, I mean, I can believe it's happening, but I don't want to believe that it's happening. I think that was everything I wanted to ask about those two stories. I don't know, was there anything that you wanted to add? Was there anything I should have asked you about those reports, or was there anything you wanted to say about them?
So besides that, what I already said, and on that, it's sometimes hard to believe, or it matters who tells these stories, and it's not that we as European journalists, if we are telling the story, then it's more truth than when refugees are telling it. We are collecting the visual evidence or trying to capture these practices on video, because then European leaders are not able to deny this any longer. So everybody knows that this is happening, and even also the people in Brussels, they know about it, or they did hear about this somewhere, or they know a lot more, and they are aware of these clandestine operations, but they want to deny, because these black sites, this kind of violence, this torture is the direct result of Europe's migration policies. This is not something, these are not rogue elements. This is not like incidents. This is systematic. And yes, we have been able to prove like 3 black sites, or 4 if you count Italy with it. But it's much wider than that, and there's much more things going on that we so far aren't able to prove. But we will definitely try our best to keep going with these kind of investigations, and keep watching what Europe is doing to innocent people.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said there about voices, and like well, you kind of just said, but do you think maybe for it to get attention at the European Union level, it needs to be told by journalists? It needs to, rather than refugees themselves?
I don't think it's journalists per se. I think it's more about the visual evidence. So the irrefutable evidence that this stuff is happening, that you can rub it in the face of the politicians, that these awful things are happening, and that it's for them, it's impossible to deny. I mean, they can deny it, but they like, for example, the Greece government keeps denying that they are doing pushbacks. Well, we prove that that's happening, but that's just make them look ridiculous. And the same with other European countries. So it's about the evidence, the visual evidence, because the story has been told by journalists, and by very respectful NGOs and activist groups that collected thousands of testimonies. But without the visual evidence, without the evidence, they just think they can just simply deny it.
So, kind of my last question that I like to ask everyone that comes on the podcast, the big one. This week has been really grim for the future of Europe and the way it treats migrants, people on the move, this kind of thing. I don't know if you've seen in the UK. There's a story this week about 200 migrant children, 200 kids have gone missing. And it's barely, I mean, it's a big story in certain circles, but I don't know if it's been picked up elsewhere. I just can't believe that. How do you feel about the future of all this? Do you think it's going to get any better anytime soon? I mean, maybe we'll get you on the podcast again. In some ways, I hope not, because I hope this situation goes away, but I don't think it's going to.
No, me neither. No, I don't think it's. I'm not very optimistic. What we've been seeing in what's happening in Europe is that, well, with the war in Ukraine, if that also shows one thing related to migration, is that it is possible to grant asylum, to host refugees in big numbers, and that the numbers of refugees coming from Ukraine is much higher than on all the other borders, and all kind of things were all of a sudden possible, but that's just for people who are white and with a Christian background, and everybody that's Muslim or black or colored, and it's not coming from Ukraine, are not accepted by Europe. And that became very, very clear in the last year, that this is what's going on. And it's nothing to do with the numbers and nothing to do with space or money. It's racism, and that's at the core of this, I believe.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think you're right. Yeah, that's the way it seems. You see here in where I am in London, you'll quite often, if you go to the big train stations, you'll see people with signs saying, Ukrainian refugees welcome, which is wonderful. It's amazing to see.
Of course, yeah.
And it's like, I remember I was writing a lot of stories about something that was happening in the Mediterranean earlier last year. Then you see these, and you're just like, what? It's just some people, it's like okay, and others, it's not okay. On that very grim note, class, I thank you so much for coming on. Thanks. I think I went a little bit over your time there.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Let me say one last thing. So that it's the situation, or that the future is looking quite grim, and I believe it will only become worse, or politicians will be more open about it. That this is their daily practice. It's not a reason for giving up. We should keep investigating, keep telling these stories, because it is important.
Yeah, you have to keep chipping away, don't you? I think as journalists, you have to keep chipping away and hope that eventually something will happen.
Yeah, indeed. And even if nothing happens, then you still have to tell this.
Absolutely. Well, class, thank you so much. I'm going to have links down to how people can find Lighthouse Reports, and I'm sure people already listening might know about Lighthouse Reports anyway. If we can help increase the reach a tiny bit, that would be great for me.
Yeah.
So thanks very much, and I'll be in touch, class. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben. Nice meeting you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Okay, well, that was episode 34 of the Silver Fleet. I can't believe I've done 34 episodes of this thing. Really enjoyed doing it, and I hope you guys do too. I can see the numbers, can see people are growing, can see the podcast is growing, can see more people coming on, see more people following us on Twitter, which is great. I really like to increase the amount of episodes that I do each month, but that's quite hard to do because I have to juggle the Silver Fleet in my spare time. And I'm trying to get us onto more social media platforms, but I'm not really very good at that. Anyway, let's see how it goes. But if you would like to help us to continue to do what we're doing, then you can donate to us, donate a little bit of money, a chunk of change, a load of change if you like. You can do that at ko-fi.com/silverfleet. That's ko-fi.com/silverfleet. Any help that you can give us would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, I've got some more episodes in the work. I think might be able to get a couple out in February. We'll see how it goes. Of course, I forgot to already thank Klaas van Dijken and the Lighthouse Reports team for coming on and organising the podcast. It's brilliant to speak to them. I really respect the work that they do and kind of hope to emulate that kind of work and their success in the future. Anyway, what else have I got to say before we finish? You can check out the Silver Fleet at silverfleet.com. There's that one. I think that's it. Right, until next time. Cheers, guys. Oh yeah, I remembered another thing you can do for us if you like to help us and you don't want to chuck us any money. You could share us around, tell everyone about the podcast, share us on social media, get the episodes out there, give us a rating on whatever podcast app you're listening to this to. That would really help. I think now that's definitely it. All right, I'm going to see you later. Bye-bye.